All right, guys, this is part two of your social studies lesson here. So we're going to move on into lesson four. Um, and this is going to be about the Indian Removal Act and the Trail of Tears. All right, so first we're going to look at this image. What do you see? Think about emotions that you see. Think about the things that you actually see in the picture. Okay, I'm going to name some things that I see. I see very sad faces. I see soldiers that are leading them on. I see someone who has gotten ill and is falling to the wayside. I see that a lot of people are having issues getting their things where they need to be. Okay, let's look at this one. Okay, in this one, I see scared people. I see soldiers taking advantage of Native Americans, arresting them for some reason. We're not sure why. I see spilled plates here. Okay. In this one, I see Native Americans traveling. And do you notice in every picture there have been soldiers that are enforcing this, that are making them move? There's another soldier. Looks like they're going to have to cross the water maybe in this picture. Okay, there's a video for you to watch on the Trail of Tears. I'm going to go ahead and move past that because it's only a minute and 25 seconds, so you can watch that on your own. All right, the Indian Removal Act. By the 1820s and 1830s, traveling west had become more popular. Many of the American settlers pushed into the land that belonged to five Native American groups: the Cherokee, the Creek, the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, and the Seminole. Life would soon be different for these natives. The U.S. president at the time, President Jackson, wanted to continue westward expansion and asked Congress to pass the Indian Removal Act. This law would give the president the power to force natives to move from their homeland in exchange for land west of the Mississippi, which is now Oklahoma. It was called Indian Territory. When the act was passed, the natives resisted, but after several years, many of these tribes were defeated and forced to move west. So basically, by President Jackson signing this Indian Removal Act, these Native Americans were told that they no longer had land to live on, and they were promised land west of the Mississippi in Oklahoma called Indian Territory. Well, guys, this land that they're going to move them to, this Indian Territory, it's not good. Number one, it's not what the Native Americans are used to. They're going to have to go on a terrible walk, a terrible journey to get there. And they are promised lots of things that are not given. I'll be honest with you, Andrew Jackson is one of my least favorite presidents of the United States. I don't think he was very fair to the Native Americans. And I think that he thought westward expansion was more important than these tribes. And you're going to see, and you can make your own decisions as we go through this about President Jackson and how he handles these things. All right, so here it says locate each of the five tribes and their routes as they were forced toward the Indian Territory. So the Seminole tribe was in Florida, okay, and they were forced up here through close to basically Alabama, and then they had to come up. All right, the Cherokee and the Creek came from Georgia and Alabama and parts of Tennessee here, and they were the Trail of Tears here. This is the Trail of Tears here. A very sad event. Okay, some of the tribes were taken this way and came this way. Creek were taken down this way, so they ended up meshing with the Seminole at some point, and they all followed up into here. The Choctaw and the Chickasaw were all right here, so they had the least amount of journey of all of the tribes. The Seminole had the largest, but the Cherokee had the hardest journey. One of the native groups, the Cherokee, fought even harder to keep their land by going to court. Although the court ruled in favor and allowed them to keep the land, it was not enforced, and the Cherokee were still forced to leave their land. Traveling over 800 miles, mostly by foot, on a pathway that became known as the Trail of Tears. So listen very carefully to this, guys, because this every time I teach this, it makes me so sad. It is such a sad event in our history. These Cherokees fought peacefully. They went to the court systems, found a judge, went to court, and the judge ruled in favor of them. The judge said, "You do not have to move." But President Andrew Jackson forced them to anyway. So even though they went about everything the right way, they still ended up losing. And the footholds of our government, once something is deemed unconstitutional, a president should not be allowed to enforce something outside of that because it's outside of the Constitution. It does not follow what our government stands behind. And Andrew Jackson chose to do this anyway, and the Cherokee suffered because of it. All right, so I'm going to pull up a Reader's Theater, and we would actually act this out if we were at school, but unfortunately we're not. So I'm just going to go through it and read it to you, and I'll upload it to your slide so you can, if you want to act it out at home, you can. All right, so here are our characters. We have John Ross, who is the Cherokee leader, and he is actually the one that went to court. Okay. You have Amma, she's a Cherokee woman. You have Wessa, he's a Cherokee man. You have General Winfield Scott, who is a soldier. You have Soldiers 1 and Soldier 2, and then you have the narrators 1 and 2. The year is 1830. The U.S. government has just passed a law that gave the president power to force Native Americans out of their land and move them west of the Mississippi River in order to continue their quest to expand the U.S. frontier. John Ross, a Cherokee leader, tried to keep their land by taking their case to court. Although the judge agreed with Ross to let his people keep their land, Ross is not so sure that they would really be allowed to. By 1838, President Andrew Jackson ordered the removal of all 16,000 Cherokees left in their homeland. "I am afraid we are not going to get to stay here in our homeland after all." "What do you mean? I thought you said the judge agreed to let us keep our land." "He did, but President Jackson is dead set on us leaving. We won't be able to resist them. The American army is larger and more powerful than us." "I can't believe this. Our people have been on this land for generations, and they think that they can just barge in and take our land just so that they can build up their homes, farms, and towns." "I agree, but what choice do we have? The president has promised us land west of the Mississippi River and money in exchange for our land. If we don't leave, I'm afraid things will only get worse." "Promises. Yeah, right. The president doesn't know the meaning of promises." In May of 1838, 7,000 soldiers came to the Cherokee land to begin the process of removal. A soldier named General Winfield Scott was put in charge of organizing the move. "All right, men, here's the plan. We must organize the Cherokee into 16 travel groups. We will lead a few groups at a time toward the Indian Territory. Be firm, but treat these natives kindly." Although General Scott ordered the soldiers to treat the natives kindly, many soldiers were often harsh, dragging people from their homes and poking them with their guns. Families were separated, and natives were forced to wait in forts until it was time to move. "You there! Over here into the fort!" "But I haven't had time to grab my things from my home." There isn't any time. Let's go now. Come on. What are you waiting for? Into the fort with the others until we have word from General Scott that it's time to go. In June, Scott had ordered the first three groups of Cherokees to begin their journey. He sent each group with an army officer and two doctors. They traveled by boat most of the way and then rode in wagons or walked. It was extremely hot, causing a drought. Travel was miserable. I'm so thirsty. I haven't had water for days. The rivers are even beginning to dry up. Our boats are unable to float. Shh! You don't want the soldiers to hear you. Keep moving. We need to travel another 20 miles before night fails. Move it. But there's no food either. How do they expect us to make such a long journey without food and water? We've already buried some of our people along the way. This is unbearable. General Scott stayed back with the remaining 13 groups and allowed Cherokee Chief John Ross to decide when to leave, but he waited too long. They left between October and December, but by this time winter had settled in, making the trip deadly. All right, it's time to send the rest of the Cherokee on. Round them up and send them out. We'll just have to face this winter straight on. All right, you heard him. John, gather up the people in your fort and let's go. This trip is going to be impossible. There is no more food, and hunting will be even harder in the winter. Even our oxen and horses pulling the wagons will have no food to eat. I said go! Travel for the remaining groups was awful. Much of the route was wilderness. The Cherokee had to cut down trees so wagons could fit. They had no shoes or blankets and often slept on the frozen ground. The Cherokees often got very sick and passed diseases to each other. Every day, people died of hunger, sickness, and exhaustion. Over 4,000 people died on what became known as the Trail of Tears. All right, guys, that's a very sad, very, very sad part of our history. So you're going to go into your student packet and you're going to answer your lesson 4 questions. You're going to stop on slide 9. We'll start slide 10 on Monday. All right, guys.